The housing market is going to crash. But will it crash by 10% or 20%, maybe 30%? Some experts are even predicting that it could crash by up to 40%, which would be 3 times as bad as the crash in 2008 to 2009. But strangely, some studies are predicting a 2.5% rise. So who's right? And how far will the market crash? Today I'll be explaining or recapping why it's looking ever more likely that the housing market will crash. I'm then going to review some of the experts' predictions to determine who's right and who's being a little bit biased. And I'm finally going to give my own prediction on how bad I think the housing market will crash. As always guys, if you've got any questions about anything I say today in this video, be sure to drop them down in the comments below and I'll answer them whenever possible. Now let's get into the video. So firstly, to start with, I've seen a lot of news articles talking about price rises in the housing market and how everything's fine, prices are going up and nothing bad is ever going to happen. But I'm here today to tell you that these price increases are probably going to be short-lived. The housing market is currently rising as a result of artificial measures that have been put in place by the government to kind of prop up the housing market. Furlough pay, stimulus checks, stamp duty cuts, tax write-offs, mortgage holidays, the list goes on, and worst of all is the printing of billions and trillions of British pounds and US dollars. All this is doing is pushing up the debt levels in the UK and the US and effectively is just prolonging the inevitable housing market crash. And when the market does crash, the printing of all this additional money and all this additional debt is just going to amplify the crash and make it even bigger than previous crashes before. Sooner or later, all of these artificial measures will end. Furlough pay and stimulus checks will end. Stamp duty cuts and tax write-offs will finish and mortgage holidays will come to a close. And then all of a sudden, millions and millions of people are going to find themselves not only unemployed, but with whopping great big expensive mortgage bills still to pay. On top of all of these artificial measures, the housing markets in the UK, the US and Australia have effectively been in a bit of a lockdown during March, April and May. No one was allowed out of their house, and this had a massive mental health impact on millions, if not billions, of people because, well, people have never been forced to stay inside for extended periods of time like that before. Therefore, it was only natural that when these lockdowns did finish, that there was a huge rush in demand for pretty much everything, not just houses. But similar to those artificial measures propping up the housing market, this demand will eventually subside. We'll then see unemployment rise as people lose their jobs if there is a second lockdown, which will mean that at the end of those mortgage holidays, people will fail to make their mortgage or rent repayments so their homes will get repossessed. This will cause millions of homes to flood onto the housing market. Seeing as the demand will have fallen off, as obviously this rise in demand is only temporary, that means there'll be millions of homes flooding onto the market with very few people other than investors out there to buy homes, therefore causing a housing market crash. But just how far will these prices crash? Well, tons and tons of experts out there have made predictions, and these predictions from the experts can be categorised into 3 main categories. The first category of experts are those that work for estate agents, such as Knight Frank, Savills, Rightmove and Zillow. This group of experts are predicting market crashes of between 3 to 7%, but with some experts predicting no crash at all. The next category of experts are those that work at consumer banks, such as Santander, Barclays, Lloyds or Wells Fargo. This group of experts are predicting crashes of around 5 to 6%. The final category of experts are economists that work at OBR, CBR, NBER or external investment banks. This category is predicting bigger crashes of between 14 and 22%, with some experts predicting crashes of up to 40%. If you're enjoying the video so far, then be sure to drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Only about 15% of you are actually subscribed to the channel, which is really low, so be sure to subscribe. It's free and you can always unsubscribe later. So which group of experts is right? And why is each group of people predicting something different to the other group? And for that, I think you really have to consider people's motives and also their funding and also their ability to attract and retain the very top talent. So let's start with estate agents. And if estate agents make a really scary prediction and scare everyone away from buying a new home, well, no one's going to buy new homes, which means they won't be able to sell their current homes, meaning estate agents won't be able to get their slice of the pie and claim their estate agency fees, meaning their sales are going to fall. So obviously estate agents aren't going to go out there and say, guys, we're all doomed, the prices are going to crash, don't buy a new home and definitely don't sell your current home. That's a terrible idea. That's like an electrician telling you, oh no, you don't need an electrician, they're pretty rubbish, don't pay me, the electrician, to do it, you can do it. It just wouldn't really happen like that. There's probably some moral element in there where big companies shouldn't lie to you to make more money, but I mean, it wouldn't really be the first time that a big company has lied to the general public to make more money, because big companies and big banks typically don't care about regular people like you and I. Now obviously, while a lot of estate agents are smart people, they probably didn't graduate from Oxford or Cambridge, or they probably didn't go to Harvard or Stanford. If they went there, they'd probably be in some investment banking or top economist role. Now obviously not everyone that goes to one of these unis wants to work in investment banking, but the typical investment banker probably has a better technical skill set than someone that works at Rightmove or Zillow, for example. So what about those consumer banks? Why are they also predicting smaller crashes, like 5 or 6%? And I suppose it's because those banks also won't make as much money if they tell everyone that the market is going to crash. Banks need to issue mortgages so they can get their application fees and their interest. If banks aren't issuing new mortgages, well, they don't really make any money. Banks don't really care if you struggle to pay your mortgage back or even default on your mortgage, as long as the LTV is low enough that they can sell the property and still get all of their loan back. So they drop the maximum LTV from 90% or 95% down to 70% or 80% and tell you that, guys, don't worry, everything's fine, go and buy a new house, you'll be fine. Even though deep down they know the market is probably going to crash, but hey, as long as you buy somewhere new and they get their application fee and a bit of interest. Therefore, banks are probably also going to be a little bit biased, just like estate agents are, so they can kind of work together to relax people and calm them down and encourage them to buy somewhere new and sell their current home so that they can make even more money. But what about that third category? That category of investment bankers that don't really work in the consumer banking division, and also the economists that obviously just provide research. This group is going to be a little bit less biased, because whether they say there's going to be a housing market crash or not doesn't really impact their sales. They're going to continue providing research, or they're going to continue receiving government funding, or they're going to continue making money their own way. This group, especially the investment bankers, have the ability to retain, recruit and keep the top talent. They pretty much get their pick from any university that they wish. Therefore, not only are they going to be a little bit less biased, but they also have the ability to create and understand the complex models that are used in scenario analysis. If you've made it this far into the video, be sure to comment the words, "I'm not biased," so that I know that you've made it this far into the video. I think that if any of these groups of experts are likely to be accurate, it's going to be the group of economists and investment bankers, who are coincidentally also predicting the biggest crashes of between 14 and 20%. Although interestingly, I think that these estimates could even be on the conservative side and that the actual crash could be even worse. Back in 2008, US unemployment rose from 4% all the way to 10%, so a 6% increase, and as a result the housing market crashed by about 18%. At the start of 2020, US unemployment rose from about 4% all the way to 15.5%, so a rise of over 11%, which is interestingly almost double the rise that was seen in 2008, and therefore the housing market could crash twice as bad as it did in 2008, so around 36%. In the UK, unemployment rose from about 5% to 8%, so a gain of 3%, and the housing market crashed pretty similarly by about 15%. In 2020, around half of the 9.2 million people that were on furlough leave are still on furlough. As there's about 33 million people that are employed in the UK, that's about 14% of the entire workforce that are currently on furlough and could be facing unemployment. Now obviously a rise of unemployment by 14% is much, much worse than a rise in unemployment of 3%, and therefore the housing market could crash 4 times as bad as it did back in 2008, which would be about a 60% crash. Now obviously I don't think it will be quite as severe, because a lot of those people that are currently on furlough will be going back to work if there isn't a second lockdown. There's also a bunch of other factors that we need to consider as well. Back in 2008, it wasn't just a rise in unemployment that caused the housing market to crash. There was also a big credit crunch, because a load of banks and consumer banks had taken on massive losses because they had to pay out significant amounts because the CDO market and the synthetic CDO market basically imploded. Now obviously while CDOs and synthetic CDOs are still around in 2020, they're not around at the same volume that they were in 2008. Therefore, there might not be a credit crunch this time round. And therefore, if you wanted to go out and buy a property and get a loan, you'd actually still be able to, because the banks won't have run out of money this time, especially as they've been printing billions and trillions of pounds and US dollars. But it could actually be more severe than the crash of 2008 because the general debt levels around the world are much, much higher. And debt levels in different markets like the leveraged loan markets are also much higher. And therefore we could have a credit crunch that's caused for different reasons. The UK government and US government are also printing money at a rapid rate. This could obviously cause inflation to have a massive impact. The governments could try and raise the interest rates to curb the inflation, which would almost certainly cause a housing market crash if rates rise too high too fast. Therefore, I think that the market will crash somewhere between 14% and 36%. I don't see any crazy crash like 60% or more happening unless we have another credit crunch and a second lockdown. But I almost certainly don't see a tiny crash like a 3% crash or no crash at all. As I've said throughout this video, I also think it's highly dependent on there being a second lockdown. If there's no second lockdown and 100% of people that are currently on furlough go back to work, well, there'll be no market crash because everyone will still have their job and everyone will still be able to pay their mortgage and everyone will keep their home. But obviously it's looking ever more likely that there is going to be a second lockdown, especially as President Trump has recently caught the virus and the daily infection rates are just continually rising in the UK. As always guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of my other videos. Alternatively, subscribe to the channel and ding the notification bell because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Cheers!